area here. It's beautiful.
Just as we came in, because I used to live in the Country Club Marianao, and the name Country Club Prado had a ring for me. So we came here, and I bought that first house, the number 990, and then it's a story. It's a romantic story about the owner of the house wanting to buy it back because she had cancer and she was going to die, and she wanted to die in the house where she had built her family. And she changed it. He was an architect, and he changed this house, which was brand new, for the other one.
Who takes care of the... You have a gardener?
Yeah.
Your grandfather's very
Take her
famous.
with my granddaughter.
Right. How do you like living here?
I love it. It's a blast. We have a great time. Birdie.
Who?
Patsy.
So you bought this home what year, Raul?
She's already working.
Good. Didn't you tell me a funny story about living here on the night of January 1st without any heating or something to qualify for the...
Well, yeah, when we moved here, it had to be before December of that year. And it was a cold night, and I had to sleep here with no furniture or no nothing, just to be here, living here before the 1st of January. So it was a cold night.
And so you have some of your paintings here too, right?
All of them. Most of them are his, right?
And they live in the back. There's another home in the back there. And,
Mine, yeah.
This is your work here, Raul?
Yeah. These are also mine, but you don't want to show that.
Sure we do.
Well, yeah.
As your company's assets grow, so
These are things you collected.
staying on top of it. What you need is a network to better manage money, people, property, and equipment. USF&G Asset Management.
Well, we're speaking with Raul Shelton. Raul, your name is not, Shelton is not a Spanish name, is it?
No, it's not. It's an English name. My grandparents were English, although they lived in Scotland. Apparently they had moved from England to Scotland before they came to Cuba. And my great-grandfather came to Cuba. He was in the shipping business and in the banking business, and he came to the oriental part of Cuba, Santiago de Cuba, where I was born in 1911. That was 77 years ago.
That's hard to believe. You look like you're in very good shape.
I do keep in good shape. I play tennis, and I'm at peace with the world and with myself.
You've had an interesting life. You've known wealth, and you've lost wealth, haven't you?
Oh yeah, well, we lost a couple of $1 million, and when Fidel Castro confiscated all our businesses in Havana, we had the biggest dealership, Ford dealership. We had Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar, Studebaker, Renault, and it was good business until Fidel Castro came. So, and we had to leave all our assets behind when we left. So I came to Miami with $13,000. That was all I had.
It's incredible. What did you do then?
Well, when I came, I felt frustrated, but I didn't want to look back. So I had one ambition, and that was getting a PhD in economics. I don't know why, but I had been teaching economics in Havana at Santo Tomás de Villanueva for 10 years, from 1951 to 1961. And so I thought that I'd do something at the University of Miami, where I could, at the same time that I was teaching, I'd complete my master's and then my PhD, which I did. I completed a master and then the PhD in economics at the University of Miami.
How did you supported yourself financially during that period by teaching at Biscayne College?
Teaching at the first job I had was at a bank here at Coral Gables Bank, and that lasted for about 7 or 8 months. And at the same time, I was able to be appointed to form part of a Cuban economic research project at the University of Miami. We published about 9 books, and we published a very good, interesting volume called Report on Cuba, and which is about 1,300 pages long, which I abridged and translated into English. And that was a report on Cuba. I abridged it to about 750 pages, and it was up to what had happened in Cuba, the economic development of Cuba, how it had reached the takeoff stage before Castro came in, etc. And then in 1965, 1966, Pedro Diaz Maestro, who was one of the professors at St. Thomas, called me and told me that he was going to teach at Biscayne College, and he was going to be in charge of the Division of Business and Economics, and he wanted me to go over there. So even I sacrificed a little bit of my salary, but it was nice to go back with the Agustinian Fathers, and so I started in the Biscayne College, and I've been with them for the last 22 or 23 years, with an interlude of about 5 years. I found that the students that I was graduating were making a higher salary than I was, so I said, something's wrong here. The parade is passing me by, so I went into the business world with a hi-fi company, with a very big company, $40 million a year, and I was the vice president for financial affairs. And so I made some money now so that I could afford teaching.
What was your impression of Biscayne College when you first saw it?
It was a beautiful experiment. They didn't have any resources. It was all done by hard work. We were working with very low salaries. I think that my starting salary was about $12,000 a year or something like that. And but it was worth it. We were doing something we thought that was we were going to help the Cubans, because one of the projects that we had was opening a bilingual program, which we did, and we graduated a tremendous number of students that came here who did not have a good command of English, and we were able to nurture them on until they were able to graduate with a working knowledge of English at least.
Now you've seen the college change quite a bit.
It has changed. Obviously, it was at the beginning it was a very small college, and it was run by the Agustinian Fathers. Most of the professors were priests, and but it was a kind of a close-knit family. It was a lot of fun. It was really you could sacrifice salary because of the environment that you had there, and nice people. We had a lot of fun. Sometimes there were more professors than graduating students, but we were doing, I thought, we were doing a good job, and at least we were able to maintain Biscayne College in spite of all the financial obstacles, etc., until Father O'Neill came and changed the complexities in the environment and created this law school, etc. And then after that we had financial troubles. I was vice president of financial affairs for St. Thomas during 5 years, most of the time that Father O'Neill was the president of the college. And we managed to keep our nose clean. We had a balanced budget, and obviously we were kind of mortgaging the future. We were building with on the basis of bonds that were going to be paid, but that's the only way that you can develop a college. You have to have courage, and you have to do that. You have to kind of use it now and pay later.
What are your hopes for the future?
Well, obviously this is what we have now is a very professional administration. I think it's a lot more expensive than what it was before when the Agustinian Fathers were there, but the Agustinian Fathers are very nice people. They're not good administrators. They don't have that sense for money. They think money is no object. And I think now we have a more professional administration in the sense that they know what they have to do financially, and I think that it's an uphill climb. They still have to dig themselves out of the hole. There's a lot of money to be paid back, and the only way you can do that is by increasing the enrollment. There's no other way, or obtaining donations and grants. And I think that that's what they're after. I think that they're doing a good job. I don't know whether they will be successful. I hope so, for the sake of the college. And I think they will. I think they're very professional.
How did you know Pedro Diaz? You knew him at the
Oh yeah, well,
Havana?
oh yes, we've been friends forever. We studied together at the University of Havana. We were studying accounting, CPA, commercial sciences, and we were together. He studied to become an engineer and a doctor. I was the one who was going to study to become an engineer. But when the university closed during the Machado Revolution, we had to change our track, and when we came back, when the university was opened again in 5 years later, it was too late to start over again with engineering or medicine. So we both decided that we were going to study commercial science, which we did, and we graduated in 1939. So we go that far back, and we've been very good friends ever since. And when he called me to go to work with him at Biscay College, I couldn't refuse.
He had a wonderful reputation as a man of great honesty and
This is just to prove how much of a reputation for integrity and honesty he had. That when there was a lawsuit, and he was one of the counseling or advisors as to the auditing, they would never question him. Then they would accept his word because he would not accept the job. In fact, he resigned and renounced several very good offers that he had because he knew that these people had 2 sets of books, and he would not condone that. His sense of integrity and his moral character did not permit him to do anything that he did not think it was right. He was a very religious man, a family man. He was a beautiful person,
Let's go back to the beginning. You say your ancestry is part Scotch on one side. Where were you actually born? Were you born in Havana?
I was born in Santiago de Cuba, which is the eastern part of the island. This was during in 1911. I was born. When I was 3 years old, the First World War was on its way, and the price of sugar went from 2 cents to about 20 cents a pound. So everybody that had a sugar plantation was making a lot of money. Well, my father had a sugar plantation, and he had the vision of selling his plantation at the time when the price was right, and to put some icing on the cake. My youngest sister was born, and her godfather was a member of the Bacardi family, and as a gift, he gave her a lottery ticket. Well, the lottery ticket won the first prize. So with the money of the price of the lottery ticket and the amount of money that he got from the sale of his sugar plantation, my father took the whole family, my 4 children, my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother, and we went to live in New York in Manhattan, in grand style, because at that time the amount of money that he had was a fortune. So he bought a big home in 40 West 69th Street in Manhattan. He bought an automobile. You probably don't even remember the name. It was a McFarlane. That goes way back. And a chauffeur. So we lived in grand style for as long as the money lasted. And it lasted for 11 years. Then the Great Depression was starting to come in. He mortgaged the property that he had at 40 West 69th Street, which he lost. So he decided that he'd have to go back to Cuba to start working again. And so we did. The whole family moved to Cuba in 1925. And I started studying again at high school and then university, where I graduated as an accountant, a CPA, and then as a lawyer.
Can you recall those years? Do you remember those years in New York?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. We lived in the 40 West. That was, I used to go to PS 179.
How was your English then?
Well, I learned English before I learned Spanish. I learned how to read and write in English before I learned Spanish because I was only 4 years old. And I didn't forget Spanish because my grandmother and my great-grandmother spoke Spanish at home. But my play and everything else was done in English, so that's why I have this New York accent. And but it was a tremendous experience. I remember it very, very well. PS 179. I don't know whether you've seen this picture of Blackboard Jungle.
Sure.
Well, that was Blackboard Jungle. You had to fight to keep your apples, fight to keep your book, fight to keep your pencil. You had to be very ready with your fists. It was all you had to be tough. My younger brother, who was not apparently as tough as I was, he could not take it. He had to be put in a private school, but I did. I graduated there, and I think I could lick anybody my own size. And you know, it's a university of life, and I had good friends, and I didn't remember their name. I remember Bush and Green. He was a black fellow by the name of Green, but he was one of my best friends. And but it was a tough neighborhood, particularly around the school in PS 79, which was in Amsterdam, between Amsterdam and Columbus. So, but it was fun. I remember sleigh riding and going to Camp Cayuga in Bear Mountains with the Boy Scouts. So I remember that very happy years. And I've had a happy life because my youth was very happy because first of all, the first years in Manhattan were very good. Those 11 years, we had everything. And then when we came to Cuba, my father had very good friends, and he was appointed as an administrator of a sugar mill. So we moved to the sugar mill, and that year, it was right between classes. So he said, "Well, I'm going to give you 1 year vacation before you start all over again." So it was 1 year in the sugar plantation. An ex-president of Cuba, Garcia Menocal, gave me a beautiful horse as a gift, and I used to go hunting and fishing and swimming in the lakes, and until one day he said, "This is it, to Havana to study." So he sent us to a school in Havana, and I finished my high school, and then I went to law school at the University of Havana. So I can't remember one sad moment. Everything, even during the Great Depression, we used to, we couldn't pay the electric bill, and I used to put on a tuxedo and have dinner with candlelight because we didn't have any electricity anyway. So but even those hard moments were put in good humor because it was my family. My mother was a pianist, and in fact, we came to New York because she wanted to study with Juilliard. She was a concert pianist, and she was very good, and she was a very happy person, and she made life happy for all of us.
Didn't she have an accident in New York with her hand or something?
And she was going to become a very, very good pianist, according to her professors and everything else, and she was going to give her the first concert that she was going to give. When she got off the taxi, the taxi cab driver closed the door on her thumb, and that spoiled her digitation forever. So that she was still a good pianist. Even I remember about a couple of years ago when she died, she was about 91 years old, and 2 weeks before that, she was playing the piano for us, and she could still play beautifully. And she was a very happy person. I think we've inherited that, and good health, which I think we've inherited also from her.
Your mother died. She lived with you when she died?
Yes, she did. Yeah.
Here in Miami.
Yeah.
And what about your father?
My father died about 5 years before that. He was about 86 or something like that when he died. Again, a very happy individual. He never cursed, never smoked, never gambled, and a wise man. He had beautiful sayings, and he's been a guide in my life as far as my philosophy is concerned. He was never angry. He never hated anybody. He loved friendship, and he always had a saying for everything that happened in life, you know. And I've been guided by that all my life. Every time I'm going to say something, I always remember him him telling, my father telling me, when you're going to say something about somebody else, always ask yourself the question, will it benefit me in any way? And I think it's a good way of being discreet and not getting yourself into a lot of trouble, speaking evil about individuals even without knowing whether it's true or not.
How did your parents adjust to having to leave Cuba?
Well, my father didn't adjust as well as I did, apparently because of his age and because he was coming to a new country and he didn't apparently have the necessary desire. I think he felt completely frustrated and he was not himself anymore. My mother, no. My mother, she took it in her stride and she was just as happy as she had been in Cuba. As long as she had her family around her, which she did, because as you know, most of us Cubans enjoy having a home like my house here. As you will see, it has 7 rooms and 7 baths, and I have all my family here. My 2 daughters are living with me. I have 6 grandchildren living with me. And the house is always full of people, full of fun, and full of joy, and they're always in the swimming pool or having parties. So we're a very close-knit family. As long as she had that, she was very happy. She made us all feel very, very happy. She died very peacefully. So, but my father, no. My father he was a little sad about everything that had happened because it was too late to do anything. But he was very proud of his family, and as long as we were making it, that was his happiness, that he knew that we were on the right path and we were doing things the right way.
What about your brothers and sisters? You had 3 brothers and sisters.
Yes, my brother had been in the rice business very successfully. And when Castro came in, he went to Houston where he had all his connections with the rice people. So when he went there, immediately he was given a job and he was helped. And he developed his own business there for import and export. And he was importing luxury items, food items. He had a delicatessen. And he was doing very well. So when my sister came over, she went to Houston to live with him. And they thought that he could help them develop their own way of living. So that's why they're both living in Houston now. And my other sister, she was living with us here in my home. And all of a sudden she got ill, she fell ill and died about 10 years ago. And she was the eldest. And her husband also died very soon after that. So I have my brother and my sister are in Houston. But they come down here every once in a while. We always have a room for them.
Didn't one sister stay on in Cuba for a number of years?
No, that was my niece.
Oh, your
a niece, yeah. Because unfortunately, one of my nephew, he went in the invasion, the Cuban invasion. He was 21 years old, very handsome individual, beautiful person, and we never heard of him again. He was apparently he tried to swim instead of surrendering. He tried to swim from one of the little small islands that surround Cuba, and he was drowned swimming from one of those small islands to another. He must have had a cramp or something because he was a very good swimmer, but we never found him. So that was very sad. And I have a niece that's in Cuba. She's a professor at the university. She teaches foreign languages, and apparently she's adapted herself to Fidel Castro and his way of life.
You've never been back there?
No, I never will. Not with Fidel Castro in power, and I don't think I'd be welcome. I've written several books. One of them contains a biography of Fidel Castro, in which among all things, I call him a bastard just to start off with. So I don't think I'd be welcome in Cuba.
What was the actual way that you left? Weren't you in the United States when you decided to leave?
I came to the United States. Then I went back to Cuba to see if I could settle some of my affairs, knowing that I would have to leave Cuba one way or the other. And but I had to leave the island quicker than I thought because I found out, much to my surprise, that my passport was just about to become due. And they were not giving passports, and I had a visa on the passport. So I thought that I'd come over and then bring my family over, which I did. I came over and brought my grandchildren and my daughters, I mean, and to the United States. And then after the big invasion, my wife came over with my eldest daughter who had married in Cuba, and she came over with her.
You lived in the country club section of
Yes,
Havana.
we did.
That was not far from the Catholic University, right?
No, it was only a couple of blocks away.
Yeah.
And I always remember the home that we built there, and it was a beautiful home. And now it's, from what I've heard, it's been given to for use for the people that come from third countries to Cuba. So it's been very well kept. They made a beautiful park around it because it was a home that lent itself for diplomatic things, relations, etc. So it's, but I don't think about those things. I kind of put them behind my mind. It's very seldom that I look back because I just look forward.
Havana was a beautiful city.
It was. It was romantic. It was a combination of the old Spanish heritage, the good sense of humor, friendship. We had beautiful clubs there. I was a member, and I was the last president of the Miramar Yacht Club. And it was nice living. It was a family. Most of the members there, we had known each other for 30 or 40 years. And in fact, the friends that I have now are the friends that I had in Cuba. We get together, we have lunch the first Thursday of every month. We get together, about 20 of us, and we have lunch together at the American Club or one of the big five, and just to maintain the friendship that we have developed over the years. The clubs were beautiful clubs, and it was very cheap for I think it was for $13. The whole family were members, and it used to be our second home. We used to have our locker there with changes, and we'd have probably I think in the last in the 20 years that I lived in Cuba before Castro, I think I never used my bathroom at home. I used to have my clothes either at the Miramar Yacht Club or at the American Club, and we used to play golf, tennis, and it was fun. It was fun. It was a nice life, but unfortunately we were not. We had no class conscience. We had no conscience of our middle class, and that was our undoing. We were not involved in politics. We used to boast, oh no, I'm not involved in politics, like if politics was something of a disease. Well, we left the politics in hands of the politicians, and they did a good job of destroying Cuba and creating individuals like Machado and Batista and Castro.
Jimmy O'Malley used to refer to Havana as Paris without police.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And
I remember you describing just driving to work, the beauty of all the flowers.
Yeah, the Fifth Avenue was a carpet of flowers. It was a beautiful drive. I remember that. When I look back, that's why sometimes maybe I don't want to look back, because it makes me a little sad to remember my drive from where I lived out in the beaches in Marianao near St. Thomas to the office. It was about 20 or 25 minute drive. But it was so beautiful, driving through the Fifth Avenue, full of flowers and the sun and the blue skies and the palm trees, and then work. You know, work was kind of a pleasure because we used to work. We used to work a lot. Sometimes they give the idea that Cubans are lazy. They're not. They're hard-working people, and they've demonstrated that here in Miami. But we did it with such a sense of good humor that we made working a pleasure. We used to, for instance, one of my normal days in Havana would be I would drive down Fifth Avenue to one of the dealerships, I'd work from 9 to about 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, I would go to the American Club. I would play a game of squash, and then have a rub down. I would have lunch there, play a table of pool, and then go to work from 2 to 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, I would go and play a round of golf until about 7. At 7 o'clock, I would go to Miramar Yacht Club, have a drink at the bar there, play dice with the people, and I'd be home by 10 o'clock, and I would have had a full day. And then if it was a Friday, generally we would go to San Souci or Montmartre or one of the nightclubs. So it was fun. It was living. We were not just existing. We were living. I think Cubans had a knack for gracious living, and a good sense of humor and good friends, and we enjoyed life. And that's something that Fidel Castro has taken away, and I think it'll never come back. I think that the life that we knew in Cuba was a conjunction of factors that very difficult to get them all together again. I think when Castro leaves, even if we go back to Cuba, things will not be the same. It's a different generation, a different culture, and but you have to adapt to changes.
Where would one go now if one wanted to find what you knew in Havana in those days? Is there a Latin American country now that's sort of like Cuba used to be?
Maybe Puerto Rico. Maybe Puerto Rico. I think that Puerto Rico have a sense of friendship, and they have a good sense of humor. They have this blend of Hispanic heritage with modern ideas as far as business is concerned. I think that would be one of the ones that resemble. And obviously Spain. As you know, I spent 3 months in Spain about 2 years ago. I went to El Escorial and it was a lot of fun. And I enjoyed Madrid. I enjoyed the Escorial. I enjoyed their way of living. But it's a different culture. I think the Cubans had molded Hispanic heritage or the Hispanic culture into something that was a lot more fun than the concept that the Spanish have of their own culture. They're more, they have a different type of humor, with the exception maybe of the individuals from Asturias,
You knew, you came across Hemingway a few times in your years in Havana, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we used to have lunch at a place that was, it was built to resemble a ship. It was on dock, but it was nice. And I used to go there, have lunch there because I was working nearby at the time. I had an office nearby. And Hemingway was always there with his wife. And he was a charming individual until he had 2 drinks too many. And then he'd become foul-mouthed, and he would throw his weight around, and he got very obnoxious. And the same way with his wife. And I don't think he had a true interpretation of Cubans. His the Old Man in the Sea does not depict a normal Cuban, an average Cuban. You could never think of a Cuban fighting a shark overnight. He had to go and play domino, have a good cigar, have some rum, and play with the friends. He would cut the lines. So the same way with his For Whom the Bell's Toll. I don't think that he portrays the true spirit or character of the Spanish people.
Where was that, the Floridita, where you would go?
Oh yeah, I'd see him at the Floridita too, but where I saw him more intimately was at this club that was on the bay. And he was always there for lunch. And it was a nice place. It was a very nice place. And as I say, as long as he was sober, he made very interesting conversation. And but a little later on, when drinks took over, he'd become not a nice individual.
Raul, I'd like to think of you as sort of a Renaissance man. You can do everything. You're an artist, you're a pianist, you're a writer.
Well, I try to do, I try to keep busy. It's amazing the amount of things that you can do if you set your mind at doing it. A lot of my friends always wonder, how can you do the things that you do in 24 hours? And I always say it's just a matter of wanting to do it. And that's the way I feel of, for instance, painting, which is my hobby. It's very relaxing. I started to paint way back in 1930. And I went for 1 year to Academia San Alejandro, which is has a very good reputation. But I only spent 1 year there because then the university, that was when the university was closed. There was nothing to do, so I took up painting. And then I never took a brush again until I came here to the States, and then I wanted to do something to relax. So I took up painting, and I've had some very good professors. Frederick Cosillo, who is married to my sister-in-law, and he's a portrait painter, and he has helped me a lot. And my sister-in-law, who's also a very good painter, she has given me, taught me how to paint flowers and things like that. So I'll show you some of my paintings a little later on. But it's been a lot of fun. And another of my hobby, which more than a hobby was a very deep-rooted interest, was writing. And in Cuba, I wrote several books. One of them had to do with the culture of the Indians, the Cuban Indians, before the Spanish conquest. And I wrote a book on the Spanish-American War. And another book was on economics, which was a textbook that was being used at the University of Santo Tomás de Villanueva. And then when I came here, as I think I mentioned before, I was able to be appointed to form part of the Cuban Economic Research Project. And we wrote 8 books. We wrote books on the stages of industrial development, agriculture, economic phases of labor legislation, and the report on Cuba. And then alongside with that, I wrote with Santovenia, Emeterio Santovenia. He was a Cuban historian. He was the president of the History Academia de la Historia Cubana. And we wrote the history of Cuba. We believed at the time, when we had just come from Cuba in 1961, that the Cubans who were being born in exile did not have any source of knowing what Cuban history was. So we thought that it would be a good idea to write a book on Cuban history for exile, for the Cuban exile. So we wrote the history of Cuba in 3 volumes, and which was published, and it was out of print in no time. All the books were sold in 2 months. All the books that we printed, about 27,000, they were all sold. And then he died. But we were developing we had already developed the outline of a book on Martí. And so I wrote the 4th volume, which is called Martí su obra, which is a biography of Martí and a parallel study of Martí, which has been made by Santovenia, comparing Martí with Washington, with Bolivar, with Lincoln, etc. So, now I'm writing the 5th volume, which is called Cuba and Its Culture, which I already have. The manuscript is completed, but I still have to give it a little bit of review. It's going to be published by the University of Miami. And so that's as far as painting and writing is concerned.
When you write, how do you write? Do you write longhand with a
I write longhand, and then I do my own typing. And I don't know why, but I think better when I do it by hand. It gives me, sometimes when you do it in a typewriter and you go over it, there's kind of a resistance to change, because you feel it's already typed. I'm not going to change it. Whereas if you write it handwritten, then you feel free to make whatever changes you want. So it's going to be typewritten later. So that's the way I do it. But I've got it all ready for the publisher, but I still want to give it a last editing, and there are some things. It covers up to 1958, from the conquest and settlement to 1958. The reason that I stopped it in 1958 when Castro came in is it's a different culture, which I'm not familiar with. I can write about the culture of, and I've written some notes and some lectures on transculturation here in Miami. But I didn't feel that I had sufficient knowledge to write about Cuban culture in Cuba, because I've never been back there. I don't know how they think or what their philosophy is, and I don't know. Maybe it's a form of kind of a mental block. I want to leave Cuban culture as I knew it, not as it is being changed by Castro. So.
You also are a musician, aren't you? Don't you play piano?
I play piano by ear. My mother used to teach me little songs which I memorized, and I still play them. And when I play them, I remember her and her scolding me because I didn't do things right, you know. And but I enjoy music. I enjoy classical, semi-classical music, and. Always, when I'm at home and I'm not doing anything, I'm always either reading or hearing music, or doing both at the same time. But I hardly ever have time. I don't remember an hour in which I do nothing. And when I have nothing to do, I feel that I need exercise, and so I go out and play tennis. And I've been playing tennis all my life now, and I took up golf for about 25 years, but I'm too young for golf now, so I'm back to tennis. And I enjoy, we have a group of friends, and we have a friend's house. He has a tennis court. So we meet there on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, and about 5 or 6 of us, and we play a lot of tennis, and we have a lot of fun. And then after we finish playing tennis, we sit around the table there at the pool, drink a Coke or a beer, and reminiscence about things in Cuba. We always have something to remember. You remember when we did this, and you remember the joke that we played on so-and-so, and so we always have something to keep up a nice conversation about old times.
Don't you also do brickwork? You lay brick and things like that?
Oh yeah, well, when I came here in 1961, we didn't have too much money, and so I had to learn how to do things by myself, you know. I had to do a do-it-yourself man, and I learned how to, most of the bricks that you see in the patio and in the front of the house were laid by me. And so I hang up doors and change closets and do carpentry and paint. But not anymore. Now that I feel that time I can devote to tennis. But it was fun doing it, which I had never done. I had all my fingers were thumbs, but I got pretty handy. And I did a lot of work here that I can be proud of.
I mean, you've doubled or tripled the size of this house, haven't you?
Oh yeah, this house, as I said, when we came here, I bought the house that is on this same street, but it's the first house on the corner there. And I bought it for, I think it cost me $43,500 at the time. And even then it was extravaganza, because $43,000 in those days, in 1961, was a lot of money. But it was a good buy. And about a year after I bought the house, the wife of the man who sold me the house, who was an architect, came to see me, and she said that she had raised all her children in that home, and she had cancer, and they told her that she was not going to have more than a year to live, and that she wanted to buy the house back from me. because she wanted to spend the last year of her life in the home where she had raised her children. I thought it was very romantic, I sympathized with the thought. And I said I was willing to do it, if she could find a home for me that was suitable. Well, it so happened that her husband, who was an architect, was building this home, and which was a better home than the one that I had. At least it was just being built. So it had that advantage of being brand new. Everything was brand new. And he said he was going to exchange it for the house that I had at a par basis, tick for tack. So I thought that was a good deal. So we moved here, and it happened that was in December of 1961. And I had to move into the house to be able to claim exemption. And it was a cold night, and I slept here that night because we had some furniture here, and it was, I think, the coldest night that I ever spent in my life. But it was worth it. And then the house was about, I would say about 1/3 of what it is now. Then the carpentry work that had been done in my house had been done by a Cuban who charged very little for his work. It was amazing the amount of work that he would do for just a couple of dollars. Well, he decided to go to New York. He went to New York, and apparently he made a lot of money, because when he came, he bought all of the land that bordered with Bird Road, 57th Avenue. He bought about 20 lots there. And he came to see me and to tell me about his good fortune, that he had made money and that he had bought these lots. And I told him that I wanted to buy the two lots that adjoined my property. And he said, I'll give them to you at the same cost that the same price that I paid for them. So he sold me those two lots in the back here with 57th Avenue. I think it was for $30,000 or something like that, which was way below the actual market value of the land. So I could have made money, but I wanted a big family, I wanted a big home, so I decided not to do anything but to build. So I built a home on the back here, which adjoins its old one property, and so I made it a big home. I built a pool, and people say that I built a pink elephant. Well, I'm happy with it. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my pink elephant. It was not being built to be resold. It was built for enjoyment, for family enjoyment, and I've had it. We've lived here from 1962 to now, so it's been wonderful.
Would you estimate what would it cost to buy this home today, do you think?
The value of the home today? Something in the vicinity of about $600,000. I've been offered $500,000, but I didn't want to sell. Yeah. And because this house is not for sale, it's for sale. My daughter will do whatever they want to do with it later on, but as long as I live, I'm going to live here with my family.
Would you describe yourself as a religious person?
What I didn't hear?
Would you describe yourself as a religious person? Or?
I have my own religion. I am a religious person, deep down. I have faith. I believe in God. But that also is inherited from the Spaniards, The Spanish have their own concept of religion. And women are very religious, but men are not. They're religious in their own sense, but they don't go to church. I go to do sometimes, obviously. And I enjoy it when I go to church. I enjoy the deep feeling of peace and quiet and inner thoughts and inside looking inside yourself. So I enjoy that. And my religion has been do unto others what you would have them do unto you. I treat my human fellow men as equal. I love them, and I try to behave in such a way that I do harm to no one. I don't permit anybody to do harm to me. I mean, I not even my children or my wife or my family. I will not let them create problems for me, because I don't create problems for them. So probably that's my philosophy. But I believe I have a deep inside faith and religious feeling, and I'm happy with that.
What about an afterlife? What do you think happens when we die?
Well, sometimes, you know, the older you get, the more thought you give to that, of what is afterlife. One of the things that worries me or concerns me about afterlife is a question that I asked from one of the priests in Santo Tomás de Villanueva. He was a very wise individual, very smart. So one day in our conversation, I said that I was thinking about afterlife, and I asked him, Catholic religion offers us an eternal life. And I said, what worries me is it with memory or without memory? Because if it's without memory, it doesn't mean anything because you don't remember who you were. And if it's with memory, it must be tremendous to always remember what happened to you and the people and what you did. And I'd be remember Fidel Castro and things like that. And he says, I said, what is the answer to that? And he says, well, the answer is a very simple one. It's eternal life with memory. But memory is sublimated, how would you say that? In such a way that although you remember things, you only remember the good. You don't remember the bad. It's just, can you imagine, for instance, in the sight of God, that you would be thinking of somebody that owed you $20 and didn't pay it back? No, it's such a beautiful sight that is it. That is it. It's just like a sunrise. When you're looking at a sunrise, you see how beautiful it is, and everything else is blocked from your mind. And that's what afterlife is. So that's a nice feeling, to feel that someday you're going to be in front of this beautiful God, whatever he might look like, and just like if you were looking at a beautiful sunrise and forget about everything else, only you remember the good things in life. So,
you believe in the concept of hell?
I think hell is your own doing. I think you build your own hell, and I don't believe in hell as painted as an inferno full of fire. I think that the inferno you create by your own way of behaving, your own system of life, your own philosophy of life. I consider myself some kind of a philosopher. I believe that when you reach a certain age and you've read and you've had a happy life, you can philosophize. Poor people can't. But I have my own philosophy, and I think it works. It's worked for me, and I enjoy people. I enjoy conversation. I enjoy going out with my friends. I enjoy my family. I enjoy my grandchildren. I enjoy life, and I try to make it as pleasant for me as for other people. I believe that the only way you can be happy is by giving happiness. Happiness is something that is inside of you, but you have to share it. Otherwise, the happiness becomes isolated. And happiness cannot be isolated. You can't be happy yourself. You have to be happy within an environment, within a family, within a group, within society. And I think I've accomplished that. I think I'm a happy individual because I've been able to create a happy environment around me. And I'm proud of that.
We know, you and I know several Cubans who were political prisoners, who were in jail in Cuba for 10 or 20 years. How do you think you would have reacted to that? Could you have?
I wonder, you know, one of the individuals that I enjoyed talking to, I enjoy his company, I enjoy his conversation, is Andrés Vargas Gómez. Because here's an individual that was in prison for 20 or 30 years or whatever it was, and yet he comes out an individual without hatred. He doesn't hate anybody. I've talked to him on several occasions. He's been here, we've had lunch together, and we enjoy each other's company. And I find him at peace with himself. That's happiness. The fact that he was treated, that he lost 20 years of his life or 30 years of his life in a cell, and yet he comes out and he's not bitter. that to me, I mean, I just love him just for that, just for I wish and I hope that if I had been in his situation, I would have done the same thing. I think that I would have come out without bitterness. I think that I would have, I don't know, but I hope that if things had happened to me, that I would have reacted the way Andrés Vargas Gomez has reacted.
Have you ever had a sad period in your life? I mean, can you recall any time when you were...
The only 3 sad periods in my life have been, one, the death of my nephew, as I said, that died in Cuba, and I was not able to see him or bury him or know where he is. And the second was when my father died, because he was the man that he was the one who held the family together. And I was sad to see him go because he was happy, but he died very peacefully. And it was not until about a week after he died that I cried over his death. At the beginning, it was such a shock that I would not have him with me anymore, but something that I did not realize until about a week after. And the same thing happened with my mother. Those are the only 3 sad moments. My mother also, she died very peacefully. She died in her sleep. And she was 91 or 90, almost 92 years old. And she died, as I said, a week before she died, she was still playing the piano and making jokes and making us laugh. So those are the only 3 sad moments that you might even say, well, wasn't it a sad moment when you had to leave Cuba? It was. There's definitely that. It's a different type of sadness. It was the sadness of frustration, of being the member of a society that had not been able to protect its own way of life. We took things for granted, and that was sad. Material things, we lost several $1 million there. We were 3 partners. We must have lost about $29 million among the 3 of us. And it was sad. It was the end result of a lifetime of hard work, and that was all left behind. Everything was confiscated. As I said, I came here with $26,000, and half of that I gave to my other partner, Vega. And so I only had $13,000, which I gave as a down payment on the first home that I bought, part of it, because I already had a job. Vega, my partner, he went to Puerto Rico, and he's a multi-millionaire again. He's in the Ford, he has a Ford representation. He has the biggest Ford dealership in Puerto Rico. I remember that he sent me a letter just when as soon as he arrived in Puerto Rico. He sent me a letter with a airplane ticket to Puerto Rico and a $100 bill. And he said, the only thing that the letter said was, come down here, half of this is yours. But, I had my family here, we had the home, and I didn't have that ambitious for material things. I'm happy for him, he's a millionaire, I'm not, but, and I'm happy for him, but I'm happy of the choice that I made.
Have you made any bad choices? If you had your life to live over, would you change anything? Obviously, aside from having to be in exile.
I don't know. I think I'd make the same mistakes that I made all over again. I think that I can't think of a time that I did something basically wrong. What I did, I always did in good faith. I did it with not only my best interest in mind, but the best interest of my family. I've always had fair dealings. I've been an honest individual. I've made money by working for it. I didn't inherit it. I didn't steal it. So I was proud of what I did, and I think that I did pretty well.
Is there anything that you'd like to do that you haven't done yet in your life?
It's a little late. I told my Felix Cosillo, who's the painter that I told you that was one of my professors. I told him, I would like to become a good painter. And he said, you can do that in the next 40 years. It'll take you about 40 years to become a good painter. So, but I haven't got the time. So I do the best I can. At least I enjoy myself. I don't sell my paintings. I give them to friends who I think will enjoy them. So, no, I'm happy. I just want to live the rest of my life the way I have done, had gone on before, with my family, and I have a good family. So I'm happy. I'm a happy man.
Who's your favorite artist?
Well, in portrait painting, Sargent. Obviously, if you go back to the classical, you have to say Velázquez and all the classical painters. But Sargent is, I think, a wonderful portrait painter, and I enjoy his painting. I don't enjoy modern painting. I can't understand it. I don't understand Picasso. And Madame Vargas, she gets mad at me when I say I don't understand Picasso. And she tells me, you don't want to understand Picasso. I say, no, I can't. I don't enjoy his paintings enough. He says, well, because you're taking a different perspective. I say, but look, if you take a painting of Picasso and you turn it upside down, it still is, I still don't enjoy it. And she says, well, the fact that you can turn it upside down is because it has balance. So that's one way of rationalizing the beauty of Picasso's painting. But I enjoy classical painting, and I wish I could paint the classical and do a good job, but it's a little late.
What's your favorite art museum?
Art museum?
Yeah.
El Prado.
Yeah.
I've seen beautiful things in El Prado. You could spend days and days there, and always have something. You could stand in front of a painting there and spend hours looking at the details, the brush strokes, the lighting, the shadow effects. I mean, it's wonderful, wonderful.
Do you think these people are touched by God in some way, these artists? I mean, are they just like us, only better?
I think talent, that type of a talent, particularly in painting, is something that is inborn. It's inherited, or it's a God-given thing. Although you must realize that in painting, that's why I say that painting is a little different. There has never been a genius. There has never been, like in pianists, you had Liszt and you had Mozart, and they could come up with a symphony when they were what, 12 years old or 13 years old. But you never see a painter that at a ripe age or a very young age has been able to produce any work of art. Generally, they do that when they're 40 years old, and that's because painting is a very difficult endeavor. A chess player, you can have a man playing chess like a genius when he's 7 years old. But it's very difficult to find a painter, a genius in painting. It has never happened. And so that's why I say, that's why Felix Cosillo told me that it'll take me another 40 years to become a good painter.
What about what books have most influenced your life?
Well, the generation, the Spanish generation of the end of the 19th century. I love Spanish literature, and later on, individuals like which are novelists and historians like Salvador de Madariaga, who, for instance, has a history of Mexico, the conquest of Mexico, which as a book of history is a beautiful book. And on the other hand, he has a novel called Corazón de Piedra Verde, which is a novelization of the conquest of Mexico. So that's the type of literature that I enjoy. I enjoy English literature. I don't think it's as rich as the Spanish literature, but I've read some very good books lately, and I've enjoyed them.
If you were on a desert island and you could have one book, what would the book be?
I think it will be El Quixote, which I just read for the, I don't know, the 11th time or something like that. It fell in my hands, and I think I've enjoyed it now much more than I did before. It has It's just like Shakespeare, you know. Shakespeare is the beginning of English language, and El Quixote is the beginning of Spanish language. You find in there all the sayings of Sancho Panza and his imagination and this little crazy notion about history that the El Quixote had, you know, romantic idealism taken to the point where the individual was crazy. But if I was to have one book, it would probably be that.
What if, God forbid, what if this house was on fire and you had 2 minutes to grab a few things and run out? What would you grab?
That's a question I haven't given much thought to. I don't think, as long as my family is safe with me, I don't think there's anything that I would consider a loss. As long as my family, maybe I would take out the dog. I'd go back to the dog. That's about it. But as long as my family is safe with me, I have no materialistic concern about anything else.
Oh yeah, that's your favorite.
And these are the Cubanist culture.
Oh, this is your manuscript?
Yeah. So, just about ready. This is a
self-portrait.
Does it look like me?
You look more relaxed than he is with your Guayabera. This is one of your works?
Yeah, this is some of my work here.
You know, I own a Raul Shelton myself, and it's something like that.
Yeah.
Remember that one you gave me?
Yeah. Yeah, but remember that I told you that it had been painted without overlapping of any kind. That's another one.
That's marvelous. Who is that?
Ah.
Anyone you know?
No.
Marvelous. How long does it take you to do?
It depends on how I feel. That's not too good. This is my gallery of gypsies.
Well, who do you use for models for these?
Just imagination. And these are some other paintings of mine. This I like. They all have a resemblance. That's Spanish pandereta.